Daniel Carter stepped out of the elevator at 11:47 p.m. The hallway carpet swallowed his footsteps. He didn't look at the Grandview logo on the wall. He owned 40% of this hotel chain. Numbers on quarterly reports. Nothing more. His keycard beeped. Door opened. Darkness inside. But someone was breathing. He hit the light switch. A woman lay curled on the edge of his bed. A small girl pressed against her chest. Both asleep. A worn canvas bag on the floor. An unopened sandwich box. An empty water bottle. A housekeeping keycard on the nightstand. Old. Scuffed. The kind they forgot to deactivate when they stopped caring about someone. His jaw tightened. Hand found his phone. The child clutched a stuffed bear with one torn ear. He dialed the night manager. 1 ring. 2. The little girl's eyes opened. She looked straight at him, not scared, just watching, waiting to see what he would do. Sometimes life puts us in rooms we didn't expect. If this opening speaks to you tonight, I'd love to know where you're joining from. As they say, we're all just walking each other home. The girl didn't blink. 5 years old, maybe 6. Head tilted slightly, watching him the way children watch strange animals at the zoo. The woman jerked awake. One breath confusion, the next recognition. She pulled the child behind her in a single motion, back pressing against the headboard. Daniel didn't move from the doorway. Phone still in hand. You know whose room this is. His voice came out flat. Controlled. The way he spoke in boardrooms when someone tried to sell him something worthless. The woman said nothing. She was already moving, reaching for the canvas bag, the empty water bottle, the sandwich box. Gathering. Not panicking. Just collecting what little she had. Her hands were steady. That bothered him. People with nothing to hide didn't move like that. Efficient. Rehearsed. He stepped forward, positioning himself between her and the door. Not blocking, just present. She stopped. Looked at him. No tears, no trembling lip. No story tumbling out about how she ended up here, how it wasn't her fault, how the shelters were full and she'd tried 2 already tonight, and she just needed somewhere safe for a few hours. Nothing. 5 minutes, she said. That's all I need. Not a question, not a plea, a statement. Daniel waited for the rest. The explanation. The angle. Everyone had an angle. She picked up the bag, lifted the child onto her hip. The girl's arms wrapped around her neck, the torn-eared bear dangling against her mother's back. Still no explanation. His ex-wife had explained everything. Every lie wrapped in perfect logic, every betrayal dressed up as misunderstanding. This woman offered him nothing. That should have made him more certain she was running a scam. Instead, something snagged in his chest. Small. Irritating. He ignored it. His phone buzzed. Richard Torres, night manager. Mr. Carter. The voice on the other end was smooth, professional. I'm coming up. I know who she is. Daniel glanced at the woman. She'd heard. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She's been a problem, Richard continued. Let me handle it. There was something in his tone. Not concern, not urgency. Satisfaction. Thin and sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. I'll be there in 2 minutes, Richard said. Don't worry about a thing. The line went dead. The woman looked at Daniel, then at the door, then back at Daniel. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did, like she already knew what was coming. 2 knocks, sharp, measured, the kind of knock that announced authority. Daniel opened the door. Richard Torres stood in the hallway, vest pressed flat despite the late hour, name tag gleaming under the corridor lights. His smile arrived before his words practiced. Professional, precisely calibrated. Mr. Carter. He extended his hand. I apologize for this inconvenience. The word hung in the air. Inconvenience. Carefully chosen. Daniel shook the hand. Firm grip. Dry palm. Richard stepped inside, and his gaze moved to the woman on the bed, the way someone might look at a stain on expensive upholstery. Clara. His voice softened. Concerned. Almost gentle. What are you doing here? The woman, Clara, didn't answer. She sat on the edge of the mattress, the child in her lap, the canvas bag at her feet. Her eyes stayed fixed on a point somewhere beyond Richard's shoulder. Richard turned to Daniel, shaking his head with the weariness of a man who had seen this before. She works here. Or worked. Housekeeping. We've had issues. Issues. Attendance problems. Complaints from guests. Personal matters affecting her performance. Richard clasped his hands in front of him. I've tried to help her. Multiple times, but some people don't want to be helped. He said it with just the right amount of regret, just the right tone of disappointment. Daniel looked at Clara. She still hadn't spoken, hadn't defended herself, hadn't offered a single word of explanation. That silence should have confirmed everything Richard was saying. Richard moved closer to Clara, lowering himself slightly, speaking the way adults speak to children who have misbehaved. Clara, I've given you chances. You know that. But this, he gestured around the suite, breaking into a guest's room with your daughter. Clara's jaw tightened. Her gaze dropped to the floor. Richard straightened, turning back to Daniel. I'll call security. Have them escorted out quietly. You don't need to deal with this. Mr. Carter, please, accept our apologies. I'll have the room cleaned and… Fine. The word left Daniel's mouth before he finished thinking it. He wanted this over, wanted the quiet of the empty room, the predictability of his own company. He didn't know this woman, didn't owe her anything. Richard was already reaching for his phone. Clara stood. No protest, no pleading. She lifted the child onto her hip, the canvas bag over her shoulder, the sandwich box tucked under her arm. The little girl's head rested against her mother's neck. Mama, I'm hungry. 3 words. Small voice. Sleepy. Clara's hand pressed against the child's back. She didn't answer. Richard's thumb hovered over his phone screen. Daniel's eyes caught the sandwich box. Still sealed. The plastic wrapper untouched. Why hasn't she eaten? He didn't know who he was asking. Clara stopped moving. The child lifted her head, looking at Daniel with those same watchful eyes from before. Mama said, save it. The girl's voice was matter-of-fact, simple. For tomorrow, so I have breakfast. Something shifted in the room. Daniel stared at the sandwich, a $4 item from the gift shop downstairs, the kind of thing he wouldn't think twice about throwing away if it got cold. Clara's eyes closed, just for a second, like the child had said something she'd been trying to hide. Richard's smile flickered. Barely. Mr. Carter, I really think we should… She hasn't eaten. I'm sorry. The child said her mother hasn't eaten. She's saving a sandwich so the kid has breakfast tomorrow. Daniel heard his own voice as if from a distance. Flat. Questioning. And you said she has attendance problems. Richard's posture stiffened, almost imperceptibly. There have been absences. Several. It's all documented. How many shifts this week? The question came out sharper than Daniel intended. Richard blinked. I'd have to check the schedule. You're the night manager. You don't know your own staff schedules. Silence. Clara was watching now, not the floor, not the wall. Daniel. Richard's hand lowered from his phone. His smile returned, but something behind it had changed. Tighter. More controlled. Mr. Carter, I understand this looks complicated, but I assure you, there's a history here. This woman has been difficult. We've made accommodations. We've been patient. At some point, Mama, the child tugged at Clara's collar. I'm sleepy. Clara shifted her daughter's weight. Her arms had to be aching. She'd been holding the girl for nearly 20 minutes now. She moved to the bed, setting Lily down gently on the edge, keeping one hand on the child's back. Daniel noticed her hands. Really noticed them for the first time. Short nails, no polish. Skin cracked around the knuckles. Calluses on the palms, the kind that came from wringing mops. Carrying trays, scrubbing surfaces for years. Not the hands of a con artist. Not the hands of someone who planned this. The hands of someone who worked hard for a long time. Richard was still talking. Something about protocol, about guest satisfaction, about how Daniel shouldn't have to deal with this kind of situation. Daniel wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at Clara, at the sandwich box she refused to open, at the child who knew they might not have breakfast if her mother ate tonight, at Richard, who wanted this resolved quickly, quietly, before anyone asked too many questions. What shift did she work today? The question cut Richard off mid-sentence. Daniel asked Clara directly, looked at her instead of through her. She lifted her head, surprised. not at the question, at being asked at all. Richard stepped forward. She doesn't have shifts anymore. Hasn't for weeks. Clara's gaze moved to Richard. The look in her eyes wasn't fear, wasn't resignation. It was cold, quiet, old, the kind of look that came from being silent too long about something that mattered. Daniel couldn't look away from Clara's eyes. That look she gave Richard, it wasn't the expression of a woman caught in a lie. It was something else, something that had been buried under years of silence, surfacing now only because there was nothing left to lose. Hasn't had shifts for weeks, Daniel repeated. The word sat wrong in his mouth. But you said she has attendance problems. Richard's smile tightened. The absences led to the scheduling changes, standard procedure when an employee becomes unreliable. So you cut her shifts because she missed work. And now she has no income. That's an oversimplification. Is it? The question hung between them, on the bed. Lily had curled against her mother's side, thumb drifting toward her mouth. Clara's hand moved automatically, gently redirecting the small fingers to the bear's torn ear instead. The gesture was practiced, unconscious, the kind of thing a mother did 1,000 times without thinking. Daniel watched. His ex-wife had never wanted children. Too much trouble, she'd said. Too much sacrifice. He'd agreed at the time, grateful that they were aligned on something. Now he wondered if he'd ever really known what sacrifice looked like. Mama works all day, Lily mumbled, half asleep. But we don't have money for rice. Clara's hand moved to cover her daughter's mouth. Gentle, not harsh. The gesture of someone who had learned that certain truths only made things harder. But the words were already out. Daniel felt something catch in his chest. Small, sharp. He'd heard lies before. Elaborate ones, beautiful ones. His ex-wife had been an artist with words, every deception wrapped in logic so tight it took him 3 years to see the seams. He knew what manipulation looked like, knew the rhythm of it, the too perfect timing of tears and trembling lips. This wasn't that. The child didn't know she was saying anything important. She was 5 years old and tired and hungry, and she was simply stating what was true in her small world. Mama works all day. No money for rice. Richard cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, I really think we should resolve this quickly. It's late. You've had a long day. Let me handle. How long has she worked here? Richard paused, adjusted his vest. The gesture was small. Automatic buying time. I'd have to check the exact, but 3 years. Clara's voice was quiet. Both men turned. She hadn't moved from her spot on the bed. Lily was pressed against her, eyes half closed, breathing slowing toward sleep. Clara's voice was tired, but steady. 3 years in housekeeping? I've been here 3 years. Richard's smile flickered. Clara, this isn't the time. You asked? She wasn't looking at Richard. She was looking at Daniel. I've been here 3 years. Never missed a shift until he cut them. The room went still. Daniel watched Richard's posture shift, shoulders squaring, chin lifting, the smooth confidence cracking just enough to show something harder underneath. That's not accurate, Richard said. There were documented absences, complaints. I have the records. You have what you wrote down. Clara's voice didn't rise, didn't shake. I have what happened. Daniel's eyes moved between them. The manager in his pressed vest, his polished shoes, his practiced explanations. The woman in wrinkled clothes, holding a sleeping child, with nothing left to bargain with. He looked at Clara's hands again. The knuckles were red, cracked from chemicals and hot water. Calluses mapped across her palms, not the kind that came from a few weeks of work. Years of wringing mops, scrubbing tiles, carrying trays heavy enough to strain shoulders. The nail on her right index finger was split, healing badly, like she couldn't afford to rest it. These weren't the hands of someone who planned elaborate schemes. These were the hands of someone who worked until they broke and then kept working anyway. Mr. Carter. Richard's tone had shifted, harder now, impatient. I really must insist we resolve this. The hour is late, and I'm sure you'd prefer. What did she report you for? Richard stopped mid-sentence. You said she's been a problem, that there's a history. Daniel turned to face him fully. What did she report you for? For the first time, Richard's composure cracked visibly. a tightening of the jaw, a narrowing of the eyes. Just for a moment, but Daniel saw it. "I don't know what you're referring to." "She said you cut her shifts. People don't usually do that without a reason." Daniel kept his voice level, almost conversational. "So what was the reason?" Richard straightened his vest again. The same gesture as before, buying time, calculating. "Mr. Carter, I assure you, any scheduling decisions were made strictly according to company policy. If Ms. Santos has complaints about her treatment, there are proper channels. You said she's been a problem." Daniel stepped closer. "Now I'm asking, what kind of problem?" Clara was watching. The child had fallen fully asleep against her shoulder, breathing soft and even, but Clara's eyes were open, alert, waiting. Richard glanced at his watch, then at the door, then back at Daniel. "This is really a matter for HR to handle during business hours. I can have someone contact you tomorrow. I own 40% of this hotel chain." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Richard's face went carefully blank. "I don't need to wait for business hours." Daniel's voice stayed level, but something underneath it had hardened, something that surprised even him. "And I don't like being managed, so I'll ask once more, what did she report you for?" Silence. Clara shifted her daughter's weight carefully, easing the strain on her arms. 30 minutes now, maybe more, of holding a sleeping child, but she didn't complain, didn't ask for help. She just waited. Richard's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, "I think there may have been some miscommunication here. Perhaps we should all take a moment." A knock at the door. Everyone turned. It opened before anyone answered. A woman in a housekeeping uniform stood in the doorway, blue shirt, name tag reading Jenny, a shift log clipboard in her hand. She saw Clara, stopped. "Clara?" Her voice was confused, concerned. "What are you doing here? I thought you weren't allowed back in the building after." She caught herself, looked at Richard, then at Daniel, then back at Clara. Something passed between the two women. Recognition, understanding, warning. Richard's smile had vanished completely. The woman in the doorway froze. Her eyes darted between Clara on the bed, Richard by the window, and Daniel standing in the middle of the room like a man who had wandered into a play without knowing his lines. "I'm sorry," Jenny said quickly, stepping back. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I just needed Mr. Torres to sign the shift log." "Jenny." Richard's voice cut through, sharp, warning. "Go back to your station. This doesn't concern you." Jenny's hand tightened on the clipboard. Her eyes found Clara's, a quick exchange, barely a second, but Daniel caught it. Recognition, worry, something unspoken passing between two people who knew more than they were saying. But now, the word cracked like a whip in the quiet room. Jenny flinched. She took another step back, already turning toward the hallway. Daniel watched the exchange. The way Richard's posture had shifted, shoulders squared, chin lifted, the practiced smile completely gone. The way Jenny shrank back, not from surprise, but from habit, from knowing what happened when she didn't obey quickly enough. "Wait!" His own voice surprised him. Jenny stopped. Richard's head turned. "You said Clara wasn't allowed back in the building." Daniel kept his tone neutral. "Curious. What did you mean by that?" Jenny's mouth opened, closed. Her eyes flickered to Richard, then away. I must have misspoken. I meant—" She didn't misspeak. Clara's voice was quiet, tired, but clear. "He banned me from the premises 3 weeks ago, after I filed a complaint with HR about tip pooling." The room went very still. Richard's jaw tightened. "That's not what happened." "Then what did happen?" Daniel asked. "This is a personnel matter, internal. It's not appropriate to discuss in front of who? The owner." Daniel felt something shift inside him, a gear clicking into place. "I'm asking a question. Mr. Torres, what happened 3 weeks ago?" Richard's hand moved to adjust his vest. The gesture was small, automatic, the habit of a man who relied on appearance to maintain control. But Daniel noticed the slight tremor in his fingers now, noticed the thin sheen of sweat appearing along his hairline despite the air conditioning humming overhead. "Ms. Santos filed a complaint. It was investigated, found to be without merit. Investigated by who? The hotel management team. Which you're part of. Richard didn't answer. Daniel looked at Jenny. She was still standing in the doorway, clutching her clipboard like a shield, her knuckles white against the edges. You work housekeeping. She nodded. Same department as Clara. Another nod. Smaller this time. How long have you known her? Jenny glanced at Richard, then at the floor. Her throat moved as she swallowed. 2 years, she said quietly. We worked the same shifts. Or we did. Before? That's enough. Richard's voice had dropped. Controlled but dangerous. Jenny, return to your duties. Mr. Carter, I really must insist that we handle this through proper channels. I'll have HR contact you first thing in the morning. She's one of our best workers. Jenny said it quickly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Her face flushed red, and she gripped the clipboard tighter, but she didn't take them back. Clara, she never missed a day. Not once in 2 years. She covered for people when they were sick. She stayed late when rooms needed extra cleaning. The guests always asked for her. Jenny's voice shook, but she kept going. And then, 3 weeks ago, she wasn't on the schedule anymore. No warning, no explanation, just gone. Richard stepped toward her. Jenny, you told us she quit, but she didn't quit. She just stopped getting shifts. Jenny looked at Clara now, directly, apologetically. I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. But he said he told us not to talk about it. That it was a legal matter. That we'd lose our jobs if we got involved. Daniel felt the pieces clicking together. Slow, heavy, like tumblers falling into place in a lock he hadn't known existed. Mr. Torres. He turned to face Richard fully. You cut her shifts after she filed a complaint against you. It wasn't a question. Richard's face went carefully blank, the mask sliding back into place, but not quite fitting anymore. Any scheduling decisions were made according to company policy. You retaliated against an employee for reporting misconduct. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Carter. Is it wrong? Silence. Clara was still holding the sleeping child. Her arms had to be burning by now, 40 minutes, maybe more. The canvas bag sat at her feet. The sandwich box, still unopened, rested on top. She didn't say anything, didn't defend herself, didn't attack. She just sat there, waiting for men with power to decide what happened next. Daniel recognized that posture. The stillness of someone who had learned that speaking up only made things worse. The resignation of someone who had been failed by every system that was supposed to help. He'd spent the last 5 years building walls against people like her, people who wanted something, people who might use him, manipulate him, take from him the way his ex-wife had taken everything. But this woman hadn't asked him for anything. She hadn't explained herself, hadn't pleaded, hadn't tried to win him over with tears or stories or desperate justifications. She'd asked for 5 minutes. That was all. And Richard had called security. Daniel thought about the quarterly reports he signed without reading, the compensation packages he approved without asking who they were for, the policy decisions that reduced human beings to line items on a spreadsheet. He thought about the sandwich box. $4, an entire dinner sacrificed so a child could eat breakfast. He thought about hands cracked from chemicals and years of hard work, about a woman who kept showing up until someone decided she wasn't allowed to anymore. Richard was watching him, calculating, adjusting, the smooth confidence returning, but more careful now. Mr. Carter, his voice had softened again. Reasonable, understanding. I know this looks complicated, but I assure you, there are things you don't know about this situation, things that require context. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, without. I know what I need to know. Daniel heard himself say the words. Cold, final. Richard's smile flickered. And what is that? I know you cut her shifts after she reported you. I know you banned her from the building. I know her daughter hasn't eaten because her mother is saving a $4 sandwich for breakfast. Daniel paused. And I know that right now. You want this conversation over as quickly as possible, which makes me wonder what else you're hiding. And Richard's face hardened, the mask slipping completely now. Mr. Carter, I don't appreciate the implication. Then give me access to her employee file. The words hung in the air. Richard didn't move, didn't speak. His hand stayed at his side, fingers curled into a loose fist. I own 40% of this chain, Daniel continued. I can request HR records through corporate. I can call the regional director right now. He'll take my call, even at midnight. He pulled out his phone. Or you can tell me the truth. Your choice. The room was silent except for the soft breathing of the sleeping child and the steady hum of the air conditioning. Richard reached for his phone, slowly, deliberately. I'll call security, he said. Have Ms. Santos removed from the premises. Then we can discuss your concerns through appropriate channels. Put the phone down. Richard froze. Daniel's voice hadn't risen, hadn't changed, but something in it had shifted. The edge of a man who was done being managed. I'm not asking for a meeting tomorrow. I'm not waiting for HR to spin this into something acceptable. He turned to Jenny. You said you work the same shifts, same department. You'd have access to employee scheduling, wouldn't you? Jenny hesitated, looked at Richard, looked at Clara, then back at Daniel. I can access the system from the staff computer downstairs, scheduling records, time cards, everything. Good. Daniel gestured toward the door. Show me. Richard stepped forward. Mr. Carter, I really must object. You can object all you want. From out here. Daniel was already moving toward the hallway. He paused at the door, looking back at Clara. Stay here. Don't leave until I get back. Clara's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted surprise. Maybe. Or the faint stirring of something she'd stopped believing in a long time ago. Daniel followed Jenny toward the elevator. Behind him, he heard Richard's voice, low and tight. This isn't over. He didn't bother responding. The elevator doors opened. Jenny stepped in, clipboard still clutched to her chest, fingers trembling slightly against the metal clip. The records, Daniel said as the doors closed. What am I going to find? Jenny's eyes met his. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, everything. You're going to find everything. The staff computer was in a small office behind the front desk. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The room smelled like stale coffee and printer toner. Jenny sat down at the terminal, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the speed of someone who did this every day. Daniel stood behind her, watching the screen fill with employee scheduling data. Here, Jenny pulled up a record. Clara Santos, housekeeping, 3 years, perfect attendance until 3 weeks ago. Daniel leaned closer. The screen showed a calendar grid, green squares marking shifts worked, red squares marking absences, gray squares marking unscheduled days. 3 years of green, then nothing but gray. She didn't miss shifts, Jenny said quietly. She was removed from the schedule. There's a difference. Can you show me why? Jenny clicked through several screens. Her hands were steadier now, moving with purpose. There should be documentation. Any scheduling change requires a reason code in the system. She found it. Read it. Her face went pale. What? Daniel asked. It says voluntary reduction, that she requested fewer hours. Did she? Jenny shook her head. Clara was working doubles every week she could get. She needed the money. Her daughter, she stopped, swallowed. She wouldn't have asked for fewer hours, not ever. Daniel felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the same feeling he'd had upstairs, looking at Clara's cracked hands and the sandwich she refused to open. What else? Jenny clicked to another screen. Payroll records. Her eyes widened. Her last 3 paychecks. They show reduced hours, but she pointed at a column. Look at the tip distribution. It's 0 for 3 weeks straight. Tips go into a pool. Yes, divided among housekeeping staff based on hours worked. Even with reduced hours, she should have received something. Jenny scrolled down. But look here, the total pool didn't change. The same amount was collected. It just wasn't distributed to her. Where did her share go? Jenny hesitated. Her finger hovered over the screen. It's logged as administrative adjustment. Mr. Torres's authorization code. The word sat between them like something heavy dropped from a height. Daniel straightened. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window behind the computer, a man in an expensive suit, standing in a back office at midnight, learning things he should have known years ago. "The complaint she filed," he said. "What was it about?" Jenny pulled up another file. "Internal communications. A formal complaint dated 3 weeks earlier. She reported discrepancies in tip pooling, said the numbers didn't add up, that housekeeping staff were receiving less than they should based on collected amounts." Jenny's voice dropped. She named Mr. Torres specifically, said she had copies of receipts that showed the difference. And a week later, she was off the schedule. "Yes." Daniel read through the complaint. Clara's words were simple, direct. No accusations of malice, just a straightforward report that the math didn't work, that $200 a week seemed to disappear between collection and distribution, that she had kept her own records because something felt wrong. At the bottom of the document, a note: "Complaint reviewed, no action required. Employee counseled regarding proper channels." Signed by Richard Torres. "He investigated himself," Daniel said. "Yes, and found himself innocent." Jenny didn't answer. She didn't need to. Daniel pulled out his phone. His hands were steadier than he expected, considering what was building inside him. He opened his email, accessed the corporate shareholder portal, and requested Clara Santos's full employee file. The system took a moment. Then the documents loaded. Employment application, background check, performance reviews, all positive, all glowing. Guest comment cards praising her work by name. And then he saw it. Under previous employment, registered nurse. Under position change reason, medical leave, workplace injury. Under injury location, Grand Vista Hotel. Under date, 2023. Daniel stopped scrolling, read the lines again. Then a third time. Grand Vista Hotel. The same chain, the same building. Possibly they'd had a major incident 2 years ago. Something about a fire. He remembered signing off on the insurance settlement without reading the details. He clicked to the incident report. The screen filled with text. Emergency response. Electrical fire. Third-floor laundry room. 2 guests trapped. And then, off-duty employee Clara Santos, RN, responded before emergency services arrived. Guests evacuated successfully. Employee sustained second-degree burns to right arm and shoulder. Nerve damage documented. Unable to continue nursing duties. Daniel's hand stopped moving on the trackpad. He thought about Clara's hands, the way she favored her right arm when lifting Lily, the cracked skin around her knuckles, the split nail healing badly. He thought about the compensation packages he'd signed off on over the years, numbers on spreadsheets, problems solved with money, filed away, forgotten. He scrolled down. Settlement amount, $12,000. $12,000. For nerve damage, for a career ended, for running into a burning building to save 2 strangers. Daniel had spent more than that on a dinner last month, a client event at a restaurant he couldn't even remember the name of. "Mr. Carter," Jenny's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" He wasn't all right. He wasn't anywhere close to all right. He was standing in a back office, reading about a woman who had saved lives and lost everything. A woman who had been given a housekeeping job as compensation for a nursing career destroyed. A woman who had then reported theft and been punished for it. A woman he'd been ready to throw out onto the street an hour ago because she made him uncomfortable. "Does she know?" His voice came out rough. "That I'm a shareholder." Jenny shook her head. "Nobody talks about who owns what. She probably just knows it's a chain hotel." Daniel looked back at the screen, at the incident report, at the settlement amount that wouldn't have covered 3 months of her nursing salary. $12,000. That's what they'd decided 2 lives were worth. 2 lives and a career. $12,000 and a job cleaning rooms. He closed the laptop, stood up. "I need to go back upstairs." Jenny rose too. "What are you gonna do?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the quarterly reports he'd signed, the liability settlements he'd approved, the human beings reduced to line items because it was easier than asking questions. "I'm going to find out what else I don't know." He walked toward the elevator. Jenny followed a few steps behind. The doors opened. They stepped inside. The car rose. Floor numbers climbing. Daniel watched his reflection in the polished metal doors. The man looking back at him was the same man who had walked into that suite 90 minutes ago. Same suit, same face, same expensive watch. But something had shifted, something he couldn't name yet, something that hurt. The elevator stopped. The doors opened onto the 28th floor. Richard was standing in the hallway, waiting. His face was pale, his jaw tight. His phone was in his hand, and his eyes held the desperate calculation end of a man who knew his story was falling apart. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I think we need to talk." Daniel walked past Richard without slowing down. "Mr. Carter!" Richard reached for his arm. Daniel pulled away. "Don't!" One word. It was enough. He pushed open the door to the suite. Clara was still on the bed, exactly where he'd left her. Lily was asleep now, curled against her mother's side, the torn-eared bear tucked under her chin. The canvas bag sat at Clara's feet. The sandwich box remained unopened. Clara looked up when he entered. Her expression was guarded, waiting. Daniel closed the door. Richard's voice came muffled through the wood, something about proper procedures, about context, about things Daniel didn't understand. He understood enough. "You were a nurse." Clara's face didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. A door closing. You were injured. In a fire. Here at this hotel." "Yes." Daniel moved to the desk, set down his phone. His hands were shaking slightly, and he pressed them flat against the wood to steady them. "Tell me what happened." Clara was silent for a long moment. Her hand moved to Lily's hair, smoothing it back from the sleeping child's forehead. "It was 2 years ago. I was staying overnight working a double, crashed in one of the empty rooms. It was against policy, but everyone did it. Easier than driving home and coming back." Her voice was flat, matter of fact, the tone of someone recounting something they'd told before, to people who hadn't listened. "The fire started around 3 in the morning. Electrical problem in the laundry room. I smelled smoke before the alarms went off." She paused, looked at her right hand, flexed the fingers slowly. There were 2 guests, trapped in the hallway. Elderly couple. The smoke was too thick, they couldn't see, couldn't breathe. I got them out through a service corridor. "And you were burned." "2nd degree. Right arm, shoulder, part of my neck." Her hand moved unconsciously to her collarbone. "Nerve damage. My hand doesn't work right anymore. Can't hold a syringe steady. Can't do procedures." She shrugged. A small, tired movement. "Can't be a nurse." Daniel thought about the settlement document he'd seen on the screen. $12,000, authorized by the corporate legal team, signed off by the board, which included him. He'd approved it, without reading the details, without asking who was hurt or why, without caring. "The compensation," he said. $12,000. Clara nodded. "That's all they gave you. That's what the lawyer said I was entitled to. I was off duty. Technically, staying in a room I wasn't supposed to be in. They said it complicated things." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Complicated. That was their word for it." Daniel's chest felt tight. His throat felt thick. "I signed that settlement." Clara looked at him. "I'm a shareholder. I sit on the board. I signed the approval for your compensation package." He forced the words out. Each one heavier than the last. "I didn't read the details. I just saw the numbers and moved on." The silence that followed was worse than anything Clara could have said. She studied his face, not with anger, not with accusation, just with the tired recognition of someone who had long since stopped expecting anything different. "It's fine," she said finally. "You didn't know." "That's not—" Daniel stopped, ran a hand over his face. "That's not an excuse. I should have known. I should have asked." "Why would you? I'm nobody. Just a number on a spreadsheet." Clara's voice was quiet, empty. "That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." Daniel thought about all the reports he'd signed, all the decisions he'd approved from the comfort of conference rooms and corner offices, all the human beings reduced to line items because it was easier than seeing them as people. He thought about his walls, the ones he'd built after his ex-wife left. The ones that kept everyone at a distance. Everyone safely categorized as a potential threat. It wasn't my fault, he told himself. I just signed papers. Anyone would have done the same. The excuse tasted like ash, even as he thought it. Because he hadn't just signed papers. He'd chosen not to look. Chosen not to ask. Chosen the comfort of ignorance over the responsibility of knowing. And Clara had paid the price. The job in housekeeping, he said slowly. That was part of the settlement. A goodwill gesture. Clara made the air quotes with her good hand. Something I could do with one working arm. They acted like they were doing me a favor. And then you reported the tip theft. And then I reported the tip theft. Daniel walked to the window. The city sprawled below, lights blinking, traffic moving, a million lives happening all at once, none of them knowing, none of them caring. How much was he taking? $200 a week. From the housekeeping pool? There are 12 of us, we're 12 of us. That's almost $20 each, every week. Doesn't sound like much to people like you. Her voice didn't waver. But it's a tank of gas, a bag of groceries, the difference between making rent and not. Daniel stared at his reflection in the dark glass. The man looking back at him was a stranger, a man in an expensive suit who had never worried about a tank of gas or a bag of groceries, a man who had signed away a woman's career for $12,000 and never lost a moment of sleep. I could have stopped this, he said, if I'd paid attention, if I'd actually read what I was signing. You didn't. Clara's voice cut through, not angry, just true. You didn't, and Richard knew you wouldn't. That's how people like him survive. They count on people like you not looking too closely. The words hit him harder than a slap, because she was right. Richard hadn't created the system that protected him. Daniel had. Men like Daniel, who signed papers and approved settlements and moved on to the next quarter's profits without ever asking what it cost to produce them. He turned from the window, looked at Clara, really looked at her, at the lines of exhaustion carved into her face, at the way she held her sleeping daughter close despite the strain in her arms, at the cracked hands and split nails and worn clothes of a woman who had lost everything and was still fighting to keep her child fed. He thought about his ex-wife, about the walls he'd built, about 5 years of telling himself he couldn't trust anyone because someone had hurt him once. And here was Clara, who had been hurt by everyone by the fire, by the lawyers, by the settlement, by Richard, by the system Daniel helped create, and she was still here, still holding on, still saving a $4 sandwich so her daughter could have breakfast. He felt something crack open in his chest, something old and hard and calcified, something he'd thought was protecting him but had only been keeping him from seeing. I'm sorry. The words came out rough, inadequate. Clara looked at him for a long moment. You don't have to do anything, she said. Really, I'm used to it. I'm used to it. 4 words, simple, quiet, and they cut deeper than anything else she could have said. Used to being ignored, used to being failed, used to systems and people with power deciding she wasn't worth the trouble. Lily stirred in her sleep, mumbled something. Her small hand reached out, found her mother's arm, held on. Mama, a drowsy voice. Are we home yet? Clara's hand moved to smooth her daughter's hair. Her voice was soft when she answered, gentle, despite everything. Soon, baby, soon. A lie. They both knew it. She didn't have a home. Hadn't for weeks. Probably. Since the shift stopped. Since the paycheck stopped. Since the last thread of stability had been cut by the man still standing in the hallway outside. Daniel looked at Clara, at Lily, at the sandwich box that represented everything this woman had left to give. He thought about all the things he could say, all the apologies and explanations and justifications that would mean nothing and change nothing. And then he thought about what he could do instead. I need to make a phone call. Clara's eyes narrowed, wary. Who are you calling? Daniel took out his phone, pulled up a number he hadn't used in months. Someone who can help me fix this. Daniel's phone rang twice before the regional director picked up. Daniel! Robert Chen's voice was thick with sleep. It's past midnight. What's wrong? I need authorization to suspend an employee. Effective immediately. A pause. The sound of sheets rustling. Someone sitting up in bed. Which property? Grand Vista, night manager. Richard Torres. What did he do? Daniel looked at Clara, at Lily sleeping against her mother's side, at the sandwich box that represented everything this family had left. He's been stealing from the tip pool, retaliating against an employee who reported it. I have documentation. Another pause. Longer this time. You're sure about this? I'm looking at the records right now. Payroll discrepancies. Scheduling manipulation. A complaint that he investigated himself and dismissed. Daniel's voice was steady, but his free hand had curled into a fist at his side. I'm sure. All right. You have board authority for emergency personnel actions. I'll back whatever decision you make and send formal confirmation to HR first thing tomorrow. Robert paused. Daniel, this isn't like you. Getting involved in operational issues. No. Daniel agreed. It isn't. He ended the call. Clara was watching him. Her expression hadn't changed, but something in her posture had shifted. Less guarded, more uncertain. What are you doing? What I should have done 2 hours ago. Daniel moved toward the door. Stay here. I'll be back. He stepped into the hallway. Richard was still there, waiting. His face had lost its color, and sweat glistened at his temples despite the air-conditioned chill. Mr. Carter, I really think we should discuss this privately. We're done discussing. Daniel pulled out his phone, texted Jenny. I need all available night staff in the lobby conference room. 5 minutes. Richard's eyes widened. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything. Daniel walked toward the elevator. Richard followed, his footsteps quick and urgent on the carpeted floor. Mr. Carter, Daniel, please. Whatever you think you found. I can't explain. The records are complicated. There are factors you don't understand. I understand enough. You're making a mistake, a huge mistake. I have connections in this company. I have friends on the board. Daniel stopped, turned. So do I. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. I am the board, Mr. Torres, at least 40% of it, and right now, I'm very interested in how you've been running my hotel. Richard's mouth opened, closed. For the first time, he had nothing to say. The elevator arrived. Daniel stepped inside. Richard hesitated, then followed. Neither of them spoke as the car descended. The conference room was small. A long table, 8 chairs, fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. It smelled like stale coffee and carpet cleaner. 6 staff members had gathered. Maria from the front desk, 2 security guards, a maintenance worker still holding a wrench, Jenny, clipboard clutched to her chest, and a young bellhop who looked like he'd been pulled away from a nap. Daniel stood at the head of the table. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window, a man in an expensive suit, rumpled from a long night, standing in a fluorescent-lit room past midnight. He didn't know how to start. All his life, he'd had scripts, talking points, prepared statements reviewed by lawyers and PR teams, every word calculated. He didn't have any of that now. I own 40% of this hotel chain. His voice came out rougher than he expected. Most of you probably didn't know that. I didn't want you to know. I come here because the rooms are good and no one bothers me. He paused. The staff watched him silently. Tonight, I found a woman and her child in my room. I assumed the worst. I was ready to have her removed. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the table. I was wrong. Richard shifted against the wall. His jaw was tight, his eyes darting between Daniel and the door. Clara Santos worked here for 3 years. Before that, she was a registered nurse. In 2023, there was an electrical fire in this building. 2 guests were trapped. Clara, off duty, not even on the clock, went in and got them out. Maria's hand came up to cover her mouth. She sustained second-degree burns, nerve damage to her right arm and shoulder. She couldn't continue nursing. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. He kept going. The company gave her $12,000 and a job cleaning rooms. The room was silent. Jenny had tears running down her face. 3 weeks ago, she reported Mr. Torres for stealing from the tip pool. $200 a week that was supposed to be divided among housekeeping staff. Daniel held up his phone, showing the payroll records. She had documentation, evidence of theft. Richard stepped forward. This is defamation. I'll have my lawyer. Mr. Torres. Daniel's voice cut through. Not loud, just final. You're suspended, effective immediately. Pending a full investigation. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings, and then you will leave the premises. Richard's composure shattered. You can't do this. You don't have the authority. I just got off the phone with Robert Chen, Regional Director. He's authorized emergency personnel action and will confirm with HR in the morning. Daniel met Richard's eyes. You can leave now, or security can help you. Your choice. The two security guards stepped forward, not aggressively, just present. Richard looked around the room, at the staff members who wouldn't meet his eyes, at Jenny, who held the clipboard like a shield, at the door that suddenly seemed very far away. This isn't over, he said. I'll sue. Legal will be in touch. Daniel's voice was flat. Take your things and go. Richard straightened his vest. One last grasp at dignity. Then he walked to the door. No one stopped him. No one said goodbye. His footsteps echoed down the hallway until they faded to nothing. Daniel exhaled. His hands were still shaking. Clara Santos is reinstated, he said to the room. Full back pay for the 3 weeks she missed. HR will process the paperwork tomorrow. He looked at Maria. There's a staff apartment on the 3rd floor. Is it available? Maria nodded quickly. Yes, sir. It's furnished. Good. Ms. Santos and her daughter will stay there tonight, for as long as they need. The room was quiet. Then Jenny spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, Mr. Carter, for believing her. Daniel didn't know how to respond to that. He just nodded. The staff began to file out. Maria went to prepare the apartment. The security guards left to ensure Richard departed the building. The maintenance worker and bellhop exchanged glances and headed back to their posts. Jenny lingered. She kept records, she said quietly. Copies of receipts, time cards, everything. She gave them to me before she got banned, asked me to hold on to them, just in case someone ever listened. Someone listened, Daniel said. Jenny nodded. Then she followed the others out. Daniel stood alone in the conference room. The fluorescent lights hummed. The stale coffee smell hung in the air. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window. The same face, the same suit, but something behind the eyes had changed. He took the elevator back to the 28th floor. Clara was still on the bed. Lily was still asleep. The sandwich box was still unopened, but Clara's expression was different now. Less guarded, more confused. Richard is gone, Daniel said. You're reinstated. Full back pay. There's an apartment downstairs. You can stay there tonight. Clara stared at him. Why? The question hung in the air. Daniel thought about his ex-wife, about the walls he'd built, about 5 years of telling himself that trust was weakness and connection was risk. He thought about the man who had walked into this suite 2 hours ago, ready to throw a woman and child onto the street because it was easier than asking questions. Because I almost didn't. His voice came out rough, honest. I almost let him call security. I almost walked away and told myself it wasn't my problem. He paused, swallowed, and that scared me more than anything has in a long time. Clara watched him, still searching, still waiting. It's not a good answer, he said, but it's the truth. She didn't respond immediately, just looked at him with those tired, knowing eyes. Then she nodded, slowly, once. Okay. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't gratitude. It was something simpler than that. Acknowledgement, understanding, the recognition of one broken person by another. Daniel gestured toward the door. Maria is preparing the apartment. It's not much, but it's safe. There's food in the kitchen. I'll have them send something up from room service. Clara stood carefully, lifting Lily without waking her. The child's arms wrapped around her neck automatically, the torn-eared bear dangling against her back. She picked up the canvas bag, tucked the sandwich box under her arm. At the door, she stopped. The settlement, she said quietly. The $12,000. That wasn't your fault. You didn't know. I should have. Maybe. She looked at him over her shoulder. But you know now. That's what matters. She walked into the hallway. Daniel followed. The staff apartment was on the 3rd floor. Small, 1 room, a kitchenette, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it had a window that looked out over the back alley, and the sheets on the bed were clean. Daniel stood in the doorway while Maria finished showing Clara around. The apartment smelled like fresh laundry detergent. Someone had prepared it quickly, efficiently, without being asked. Lily had woken during the elevator ride. She sat on the edge of the bed now, swinging her legs. The torn-eared bear clutched in her arms. Her eyes moved around the room, taking in the unfamiliar walls, the small table, the window with its view of nothing special. "Is this our new house?" she asked. Clara knelt beside her. "For now, baby. Just for now. It's small. It's safe." Lily considered this, then nodded, apparently satisfied with the trade-off. Maria excused herself quietly, slipping past Daniel with a small nod. The door clicked shut behind her. The room felt different without other people in it. Quieter, more real. Clara straightened up. She still had the canvas bag over her shoulder. The sandwich box was on the kitchenette counter, now still unopened. "You should eat," Daniel said. "What?" "The sandwich. You should eat it. There's food coming up from room service. You don't have to save it anymore." Something shifted in Clara's face. Not quite a smile, but close. "Old habit," she said quietly. "Hard to break." Daniel understood that. Old habits. Hard to break. He had plenty of his own. He should leave. The job was done. Richard was gone. Clara was reinstated. The apartment was ready. There was nothing more for him to do here. But his feet didn't move. "I signed those reports," he said. The words came out before he could stop them. "The compensation package. Your settlement. I signed them without reading the names, without asking who was hurt. I just looked at the numbers and moved on." Clara's expression didn't change. "I've been doing that for years," he continued. "Looking at numbers, moving on, telling myself it wasn't my responsibility to ask questions." The fluorescent light hummed overhead. Lily was playing with her bear's torn ear, not paying attention to the adults. "Why are you telling me this?" Daniel didn't have a good answer. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because you're the first person I've met in a long time who didn't want anything from me. And I almost threw you out anyway." Clara studied him, the same searching look from before, still looking for the angle. "You didn't, though." "I almost did." "Almost doesn't count." She set the canvas bag down on the floor. "I've been almost a lot of things. Almost fired. Almost homeless. Almost gave up." A pause. "Almost only matters if you let it." Lily looked up from her bear. "Mama, can I have some water?" Clara moved to the kitchenette, filled a glass from the tap, brought it to her daughter. Daniel watched. Such a simple thing. A glass of water for a child. The kind of thing that cost nothing and meant everything. "I should go," he said. Clara nodded. "Thank you. For everything. It's not enough. It's more than anyone else did." The words landed somewhere deep in Daniel's chest, settled there. Lily finished her water and handed the glass back to her mother. Then she looked at Daniel again. Those same watchful eyes from the suite, hours and a lifetime ago. "You're the man from before," she said. "From the big room." "Yes." "You looked angry." "I was." "But you helped us anyway." Daniel crouched down so he was at her eye level. His knees ached. He wasn't as young as he used to be. "I did." Lily tilted her head, thinking, "My teacher says sometimes people are mean because they're scared. Were you scared?" The question hit him harder than anything Richard had said. Harder than the settlement figures or the incident report or the $12,000. "Yes," he said. "I think I was." Lily nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "It's okay to be scared," she said. "Mama says being brave isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing the right thing anyway." Daniel looked at Clara. She was watching her daughter with something that might have been surprise. "Your mama is right," he said. He stood up, looked at Clara one last time. "If you need anything, I know where to find you." He left. The hallway was quiet, carpet soft under his feet, fluorescent lights casting everything in that flat, institutional glow. He took the elevator down, watched the numbers change. 3, 2, 1. Lobby. The doors opened. Maria was at the front desk, typing something into the computer. She looked up when she heard him. "Good night, Mr. Carter." Daniel stopped. An hour ago, a lifetime ago, he would have nodded and kept walking. Just another transaction, another face he didn't need to see. "Thank you," he said, "for helping tonight, for getting the apartment ready so quickly." Maria blinked, surprised. "You're welcome, sir. What time does your shift end?" 6 a.m. "That's a long night." "It is." She smiled slightly. "But it's quiet." "I like quiet." Daniel nodded. "Good night, Maria." "Good night, Mr. Carter." He walked toward the front doors. The lobby was empty now, just the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of someone vacuuming somewhere. The automatic doors slid open. Night air hit his face. Cool. Fresh. The smell of the city at this hour, exhaust and concrete, and something green from the park across the street. Daniel stepped outside. The city was still lit, still busy. Cars moved through intersections. A distant siren wailed and faded. Somewhere, someone was laughing. The same city he'd walked through hours ago. The same streets, the same lights, the same indifferent sprawl of a million lives happening all at once. But it looked different now. He stood on the sidewalk, just breathing, just existing. For 5 years, he'd been building walls, protecting himself from anyone who might get close enough to hurt him, convincing himself that trust was weakness and connection was risk. And tonight, a woman with nothing, a woman he'd almost thrown out onto the street, had shown him something he'd forgotten. Being brave isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing the right thing anyway. He started walking, no destination, just forward. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know if he'd wake up and be the same man who had walked into that suite, or someone different. But for the first time in a very long time, he thought maybe it was possible. Maybe tomorrow could be better. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Sometimes a story settles somewhere quiet in us, not as an answer, just as something familiar, something that sits in the chest and asks for nothing but a moment of stillness. Many of us have stood where Daniel stood, not in a hotel suite, perhaps, but in a doorway of our own making. We have judged too quickly. We have looked away when looking closer felt too hard. We have carried old wounds into new rooms and let them decide who we see. And some of us have been Clara, working without recognition, holding something heavy without complaint, waiting for someone, anyone to simply ask the right question. That ache you might be feeling right now, it doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't need to become anything more than what it is. It's allowed to just rest there, tender, unfinished, human. Not everything needs to be fixed. Some things only need to be felt. And perhaps that's enough for tonight, to sit with this, to let it be what it is, to know that somewhere, someone else is feeling it too. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for being here.